Get out and never come back!
Please, not like this.
Picture this: Christmas Eve, snow falling outside. A pregnant woman sits at a table surrounded by her husband's family, desperately hoping that this year they will finally accept her. She has spent 3 days cooking, 3 days preparing, 3 days telling herself that if she just tries hard enough, they will love her. Then her husband stands up during dessert and announces he has filed for divorce. But wait, it gets worse. The doorbell rings.
As you can see,
His mistress
I'm in
walks
charge
in
now.
wearing the red dress this pregnant wife could never afford.
The
The mother-in-law takes the wife's plate of food and hands it to the mistress. Then she hands the pregnant wife a garbage bag for her belongings. Because the Louis Vuitton suitcases, those belong to the family. She walks out into the snow with nothing. No money, no phone, no friends. Her husband has already destroyed her reputation with lies. She nearly dies from hypothermia in an alley. But here is what her husband does not know. Here is what his cruel mother does not know. The quiet woman they just threw away like garbage, her mother left her $40 million. And controlling shares in the bank that funds their entire empire, and the land beneath their most important building. They thought they were discarding a powerless nobody. They had no idea they just created their worst nightmare. This is the story of Eleanor Hayes, a woman who was patient when they thought she was weak, who was watching when they thought she was invisible, who built an empire in the shadows while they celebrated her destruction. And when she finally revealed herself, the revenge was absolutely devastating. Stay with me until the end. Because what happens at that charity gala? You will never see it coming. This is not just a story about revenge. This is about what happens when the people who threw you away discover you were the most powerful person in the room all along. Lesson and value statement. But this story is not just about revenge. It is about something far more important. It is about knowing your worth when everyone around you says you have none. It is about building strength in silence. It is about understanding that patience is not weakness. Patience is preparation. And most importantly, it is about never letting anyone else write your story. If you have ever been underestimated, dismissed, or thrown away by people who should have loved you, this story is for you. If you have ever wondered whether karma is real, whether the people who hurt you will ever face consequences, this story will give you hope. And if you are going through something difficult right now, something that feels impossible to survive, Eleanor's journey will remind you that the darkest moments are often the beginning of your greatest transformation. Eleanor Hayes had spent 3 days preparing for this dinner, 3 days of chopping, seasoning, and basting, 3 days of polishing silver that already gleamed and arranging flowers that would never be good enough, 3 days of telling herself that this Christmas would be different, that Margaret Sterling would finally see her as family instead of an intruder who had somehow tricked her precious son into marriage. She was 6 months pregnant, her belly round and obvious beneath the navy dress she had chosen carefully that morning. The dress was conservative, elegant, exactly the kind of thing Margaret might approve of. Eleanor had even practiced her posture in the mirror, remembering every criticism her mother-in-law had delivered over the past 3 years. Stand straighter, smile softer, speak less. The Sterling mansion glittered with Christmas decorations that cost more than Eleanor's childhood home. Crystal chandeliers cast golden light across a dining table set with china that had been in the family for 4 generations. The tree in the corner touched the 14-foot ceiling, decorated with ornaments that each had their own insurance policy. Eleanor carried her famous apple pie to the table, the one made from her late mother's recipe. Her mother had passed 6 months ago, and making this pie felt like carrying a piece of her into a room where Eleanor desperately needed an ally. Margaret Sterling sat at the head of the table like a queen surveying her kingdom. At 64, she remained striking, her silver hair perfectly styled, her posture impeccable, her eyes sharp enough to find fault in a sunrise. She took one bite of Eleanor's pie. Then she pushed the plate away. "Store-bought would have been better, dear." The words landed like a slap. Around the table, Richard's sister Emma smirked into her wine glass. His brother Thomas coughed to hide a laugh. And Richard, Eleanor's husband of 3 years, said nothing at all. Eleanor felt her face flush, but kept her voice steady. "It is my mother's recipe. She taught me to make it when I was 12. Margaret's smile never reached her eyes. Perhaps that explains it. Some recipes should stay in certain kitchens. The meal continued in a rhythm of small cruelties. Margaret commented on Eleanor's weight gain, attributing it to poor diet rather than pregnancy. Emma asked pointed questions about Eleanor's lack of career advancement. Thomas made jokes about people who married above their station. And through it all, Richard sat beside Eleanor without once defending her. His silence was its own statement, loud and clear. He had chosen his family's approval over his wife's dignity, and he made that choice fresh every single day. Eleanor noticed him texting under the table, smiling at something on his screen. She told herself it was work. She had been telling herself a lot of things lately. Halfway through dessert, Richard stood up. "I have an announcement to make." The table fell silent. Eleanor looked up at her husband, expecting perhaps news about a business deal or a vacation plan. His face showed no emotion, no warmth, nothing that suggested what was coming. "I have filed for divorce," Richard said calmly. "The papers were submitted last week. Eleanor will be leaving tonight." The words did not make sense at first. Eleanor heard them, but they seemed to belong to someone else's life, someone else's nightmare. She sat frozen, her fork suspended halfway to her mouth, her mind struggling to process the impossible. "Richard," she whispered, "what are you talking about?" He still was not looking at her. His gaze was fixed somewhere over her shoulder, his voice as steady as if he were discussing the weather. "Our marriage is not working, Eleanor. I think we both know that. You never fit in with this family. You embarrassed me at the Whitmore Gala. You cannot even cook a proper meal." Eleanor's hand moved instinctively to her belly, to the baby growing inside her. "I am 6 months pregnant with your child." "The prenup ensures you get nothing," Richard continued, as if she had not spoken. "My lawyers have already reviewed everything. This will be clean and simple." The doorbell rang. Margaret's face transformed into something Eleanor had never seen before, a smile of genuine warmth and welcome. That will be her now, her. Richard walked to the foyer. Eleanor heard voices, a woman's bright laughter, the sound of a coat being removed. Then they appeared in the doorway, and something inside Eleanor cracked and shattered. The woman was young and polished, her blonde hair styled perfectly, her red dress elegant and expensive. It was the same red dress Eleanor had saved for, the one she could not afford, because Richard controlled all the finances. The woman moved with the confidence of someone who had never been made to feel small. Richard's hand rested possessively on her lower back. "Everyone, this is Victoria, my fiancé, not girlfriend, fiancée," which meant this had been going on for months, planned and executed, while Eleanor slept beside him, carried his child, tried desperately to earn his family's acceptance. Victoria smiled at the table. "It is wonderful to finally meet you all properly. Richard has told me so much about his family." She glanced at Eleanor, her expression friendly and completely unbothered. "And you must be Eleanor. Richard mentioned you would be here tonight. What an awkward situation. But I suppose it is better to be straightforward about these things. Margaret stood immediately, embracing Victoria with genuine warmth. We are so delighted Richard has found someone suitable. Please, sit here. She gestured to Eleanor's chair. The chair Eleanor was still sitting in. The implication hit like a physical blow. Not just replacement, but immediate erasure. Eleanor was expected to simply vacate her seat, her place, her life, and watch as this stranger stepped into the space still warm from her presence. I am still sitting here, Eleanor said, her voice steady despite the chaos roaring inside her head. Richard's expression hardened. Then stand up, Eleanor. You are leaving anyway. Do not make this harder than it needs to be. Emma leaned back in her chair, clearly enjoying the spectacle. Come on, Eleanor. Show some dignity. You have lost. Accept it gracefully. Dignity. These people who had spent 3 years stripping away every shred of her self-respect were now lecturing her about dignity. Eleanor rose slowly, her legs shaking, her hand pressed against the table for balance. She looked at Richard, really looked at him, searching for any trace of the man she had married, the man who had promised to love her. She found nothing but cold calculation. What about the baby? Eleanor whispered. What about our daughter? Richard's jaw tightened. We will discuss custody arrangements through lawyers. I will provide financial support as required by law. But this child does not change anything between us. Victoria touched Richard's arm gently. I am sure we can all be reasonable about this. Children need stability, and Richard will certainly be a wonderful father. The casual claim to Eleanor's child's future ignited something hot in her chest. But she swallowed it down, forced herself to breathe, forced herself to think. Margaret picked up Eleanor's dessert plate and handed it to Victoria. Here, dear, you must try this. Victoria sat in Eleanor's chair as if she had always belonged there. I will have someone bring your things to you, Richard said without looking at Eleanor. You should have enough clothing for now. Margaret appeared beside Eleanor, holding something out. A garbage bag. For your things, dear. The suitcases are Louis Vuitton. Eleanor took the bag. Her hands were shaking, but she did not cry. She would not give them that satisfaction. She walked toward the foyer, each step taking her further from everything she had known. Her coat hung near the door, the navy wool she had worn arriving at this dinner, what felt like years ago instead of hours. The front door was heavy oak, the handle cold against her palm. She pulled it open, and December air rushed in, sharp and biting. Richard had taken her phone. He had canceled her credit cards. She had nothing but the clothes on her back and a sealed envelope in her coat pocket, the one her mother had left her with instructions not to open until she truly needed it. Eleanor stepped out into the snow. The door closed behind her with a soft click that sounded like the end of everything. The snow fell harder as Eleanor walked away from the Sterling mansion. She had no destination, no plan, no resources. Richard had systematically cut her off from everything during their marriage, isolating her from friends, controlling the finances, making her dependent on his approval for every aspect of her life. She had not seen it happening because she had wanted so desperately to believe in the fairy tale. Poor girl meets wealthy prince. Prince saves her from ordinary life. They live happily ever after. The fairy tale had been a trap. Eleanor walked for blocks, her thin coat doing nothing against the bitter cold. Her feet ached, her belly felt heavy. The baby kicked, and Eleanor pressed her hand against the movement, the only warmth in a frozen world. She found a motel 3 miles from the Sterling mansion, a run-down place with a flickering neon sign and a clerk who looked like he had seen better decades. Eleanor approached the counter with the single credit card Richard had allowed her to carry, the one for emergencies. I need a room for the night. The clerk ran the card. Then he ran it again. Then he shook his head, declined. You got another form of payment? Eleanor stared at him. Richard had canceled the card. Of course he had. He had planned every detail of her destruction with the same precision he applied to his business deals. I do not have anything else. The clerk shrugged. Cannot help you then. There is a shelter on 5th Street, opens at 9. Eleanor walked back into the cold. The temperature was dropping, and she could feel her body starting to shake, the kind of shaking that came before hypothermia. She needed help. She needed someone to call. Her best friend, Sarah. They had known each other since college, before Eleanor had met Richard, before everything changed. Sarah would help. Sarah would understand. Eleanor found a payphone, the kind she did not know still existed, and used the handful of coins in her coat pocket to make the call. A man answered. Sarah's husband, David. David, it is Eleanor. I need to speak with Sarah. It is an emergency. There was a long pause. Then David's voice came through cold and final. Richard called us tonight. He told us everything, how you cheated on him, how you have been unstable, how you have been lying about being pregnant to trap him. Sarah does not want to talk to you. Do not call this number again. The line went dead. Eleanor stood in the phone booth, the receiver still pressed to her ear, listening to the dial tone as her last hope evaporated. Richard's smear campaign had already begun. He was not just divorcing her, he was erasing her, rewriting the story so that she became the villain and he became the victim. Have you ever had someone you trusted completely turn your own friends against you? Have you ever felt the ground disappear beneath your feet while everyone watched and did nothing? Eleanor left the phone booth and kept walking. She did not know where she was going anymore. The cold had seeped into her bones, and her thoughts were becoming fuzzy, disconnected. She just needed to rest for a moment. Just needed to sit down and close her eyes. She found herself in an alley behind a construction site, partially sheltered from the wind by scaffolding and plastic sheeting. The building was half finished, skeletal and empty. But there was a corner where the wind did not reach quite so fiercely. Eleanor lowered herself to the ground, her back against concrete blocks, her arms wrapped around her belly. The baby was moving frantically now, as if sensing something was wrong. Then the pain hit, sharp, sudden, terrifying. Contractions. Too early. Much too early. Eleanor tried to stand, but her legs would not cooperate. The world was spinning, darkness creeping in at the edges of her vision. She thought about her mother, about the envelope in her pocket, about the baby who might never take her first breath. Then everything went black. She woke to warmth. Someone had wrapped a jacket around her, a heavy canvas work jacket that smelled like sawdust and coffee. She was no longer on the cold ground, but in the back seat of a truck, the heater blasting, the radio playing softly. A man's face appeared in her vision. Mid-30s, strong features, worried eyes. Hey, you are awake. Thank God, I found you behind the building. I work the site. We are almost at the hospital. Just hang on, okay? Eleanor tried to speak, but her voice would not come. You do not have to tell me anything, the man said. You just have to get better. That baby of yours is counting on you. The hospital was a blur of bright lights and urgent voices. Eleanor was rushed into a room, monitors attached, doctors appearing and disappearing with concerned expressions. The contractions had stopped, but they needed to run tests, needed to make sure the baby was not in distress. 6 hours later, a doctor told her what she already knew. You are experiencing stress-induced early labor. The baby is stable now, but you need rest, warmth, and minimal stress for the remainder of your pregnancy. Continued exposure to those conditions could have been fatal for both of you. The man from the construction site was still there. He had stayed in the waiting room the entire time, a stranger who had no obligation to care, but cared anyway. His name was Daniel Wright. He was 36 years old, a construction foreman, a single father to an 8-year-old daughter named Lily. He had been married once, briefly, until his wife left him for her yoga instructor because he lacked spiritual depth. He still was not sure what that meant. "My mama raised me right," Daniel said when Eleanor asked why he had helped her. "She would have killed me if I left you there." Eleanor managed a weak smile. "Your mama sounds lovely." She was. She passed a few years back. "But I still hear her voice every time I'm about to do something stupid or skip doing something decent." The hospital wanted to keep Eleanor overnight for observation. Daniel told her about a heated trailer on his construction site. Not fancy, but warm. The mice were friendly. It was the first time Eleanor had laughed in months. Alone in her hospital room that night, Eleanor finally remembered the envelope, her mother's final gift, the one with instructions not to open until she truly needed it. Sitting in a hospital bed, abandoned, penniless, pregnant, and nearly dead from exposure, seemed to qualify. Eleanor opened the envelope. Inside was a letter written in her mother's careful handwriting, dated 2 months before her death. Behind it were documents, dozens of pages of legal papers, and financial statements that made no sense at first glance. Then Eleanor started reading. "My darling Eleanor," the letter began, "if you are reading this, then you have finally hit the bottom I always feared for you. But here is what you do not know. The bottom is where I built your foundation. I was not just a housekeeper scraping by to raise you. I was watching, learning, investing every tip, every dollar for 30 years. The Sterlings? I cleaned their house in 1995. I saw how they destroyed people. I have been preparing for this moment since you announced your engagement." Eleanor's hands began to shake. "You have $40 million. Properties in prime locations across 3 states. Investment portfolios diversified across industries. Legal structures so carefully designed that no divorce proceeding can access them because they were established long before you ever met Richard. But more importantly, you have positions. I own 12% of Meridian Holdings, their bank. I own the land their precious Hancock Tower is built on. I own debts they do not know exist. $40 million. Her mother, who had worn the same coat for 15 years, who had worked double shifts to pay for Eleanor's college, who had never taken a vacation or bought anything new, had been a secret multimillionaire. The letter continued. "I never told you because I needed you to learn what it meant to have nothing. I needed you to understand humiliation, to experience powerlessness, to develop the patience and observation skills that would make you worthy of this legacy. Wealth given to someone who has not earned wisdom is just money waiting to be lost. But wealth placed in the hands of someone who has endured, who has learned, who has watched and waited and understood human nature at its worst, that is power that can change everything." Eleanor read the final paragraphs through tears. "Do not use this money to run away. Use it to make them know who destroyed them. Make them beg. Then decide if mercy is something they deserve. The money is a tool. You are the weapon. Love always, Mom. P.S. Marcus Webb has everything. He is expecting your call." Marcus Webb had an office on the 42nd floor of a glass tower downtown. He was in his early 40s, distinguished, with the kind of calm confidence that came from decades of handling other people's crises. He had known Eleanor's mother for 15 years, had helped her build the invisible empire that Eleanor was only now discovering. "Your mother was brilliant," Marcus said, spreading documents across his mahogany desk. "She understood something most people never grasp. Real power is not loud or obvious. It is quiet, strategic, and absolutely unassailable when constructed properly. Eleanor sat across from him, still processing the magnitude of what she had inherited. The construction trailer Daniel had offered was now her temporary home, modest and hidden. Exactly the kind of place no one would expect to find a woman worth $40 million. Walk me through everything, Eleanor said. I need to understand what I have. Marcus pulled up a presentation on his laptop. First, liquid assets. 40 million in diversified investments, accessible immediately. Your mother grew this from nothing over 30 years, investing every tip, every bonus, every dollar she could save. Eleanor thought about all the times she had wished she could help her mother, all the times she had felt guilty about accepting money for college. Her mother had been building a fortress while pretending to scrape by. Second, real estate, commercial properties in Chicago, residential holdings in Austin, a shopping center in Denver. Each one generates passive income. Each one was chosen for strategic value, not just profit. Marcus clicked to the next slide. Third, and this is where it gets interesting, Meridian Holdings. Your mother owns 12% of the voting shares. Meridian is the primary lender for Sterling Development. They control Richard's access to capital. Eleanor leaned forward. She controls whether Richard gets loans. You control that now. Your vote can influence whether credit lines are renewed, expanded, or restricted. The implications settled over Eleanor like a weight. She could destroy Richard's business with a single vote. She could take away everything he valued, everything he had chosen, over her and their daughter. But Marcus was not finished. Fourth, and your mother saved this one for last, the land under Hancock Tower, Sterling Development's flagship project, Richard's crown jewel, the building that is supposed to cement his legacy. The lease they signed? It was with your mother's shell company. You own the ground beneath his empire. Eleanor sat back in her chair, stunned. Her mother had spent decades positioning these pieces, waiting for the moment when Eleanor would need them. Why did she let me suffer? The question emerged before Eleanor could stop it. She watched me marry him. She watched them humiliate me for 3 years. She never said anything. Marcus's expression softened. She explained it to me once. She said that someone who had never been powerless could never truly understand how to wield power responsibly, that you needed to see them clearly, to experience what they were capable of, to build the patience and observation skills that would make you worthy of this inheritance. Eleanor felt tears, threatening, but forced them back. And if Richard had been kind, if his family had accepted me, then you would have lived a happy life, and the money would have been a pleasant surprise. Your mother was not cruel, Eleanor. She was prepared. She hoped for the best and planned for the worst. Eleanor looked at the documents spread across the desk, at the power represented in legal language and financial statements. She thought about the garbage bag Margaret had handed her. She thought about Victoria sitting in her chair. What are my options? She asked quietly. Marcus leaned forward. You could take the money and disappear. Start fresh somewhere. No one knows your name. Build a new life. Raise your daughter in peace. Never think about the Sterlings again. Eleanor considered this. It was tempting. She was tired, pregnant, traumatized. The idea of walking away from all of it held genuine appeal. Or you could stay. Use these resources strategically. Dismantle everything Richard has built, piece by piece, until he understands exactly what he lost and exactly who took it from him. Her phone buzzed on the desk. Eleanor glanced at the screen and felt her blood turn cold. It was a notification from Victoria's Instagram. A photo posted 20 minutes ago showing Victoria at the Sterling mansion wearing Eleanor's wedding ring, resized to fit her finger. The caption read, "Out with the old, In with the new, hashtag upgrade, hashtag real wife. Eleanor stared at the image for a long moment. The ring Richard had placed on her finger 3 years ago, the ring she had removed and left on the bathroom counter when she was thrown out, now sparkling on another woman's hand like a trophy. I am not running, Eleanor said quietly. I am not going to let them win. Marcus nodded slowly. Then we have work to do. Over the next several hours, Marcus walked Eleanor through her mother's strategy in detail. The shell companies that concealed ownership, the corporate structures that prevented tracing, the legal protections that made her position unassailable. Your mother spent 30 years building this, Marcus explained. She watched the Sterlings for decades, identified their vulnerabilities, positioned herself strategically. Everything is in place. You just need to decide when and how to use it. Eleanor thought about Richard's announcement at Christmas dinner. The casual cruelty, the complete absence of remorse. He had not just ended their marriage. He had tried to destroy her dignity, her reputation, her connection to everyone she knew. He needs to know it was me, Eleanor said. When everything falls apart, I want him to know exactly who brought it down. That can be arranged. But I would advise patience. The more secure they feel in their victory, the more devastating it will be when you finally act. Let them celebrate. Let them grow comfortable. Give them time to believe they have won completely. Eleanor nodded slowly. My mother always said patience was power. She was right. And you have inherited not just her money, but her wisdom. Use it. That night, alone in Daniel's construction trailer, Eleanor began her transformation. She studied the documents Marcus had provided, learning the intricacies of corporate ownership and strategic investment. She mapped Richard's business operations, identifying pressure points and vulnerabilities. She thought about her mother, working double shifts while secretly building an empire, about all the time she had cleaned the Sterling house, invisible and overlooked, watching and learning. Some people saw service workers as furniture, as nothing, as less than human. The Sterlings had made that mistake with Eleanor's mother for decades. Now they were making it with Eleanor, and just like her mother, Eleanor was watching, learning, preparing. The pregnancy continued without further complications. Daniel checked on her daily, never prying, never pushing, just showing up with food or supplies or quiet company when she needed it. His daughter, Lily, drew pictures for Eleanor's baby, elaborate crayon creations featuring rainbows and puppies and the words, "Welcome to the world." Eleanor had never known kindness like this. Simple, uncomplicated kindness with no agenda and no strings attached. It made her realize just how broken her marriage had truly been. June Martinez appeared in Eleanor's life like an answer to a prayer she had not known she was praying. She was 58 years old, a retired nurse, a widow who had raised 3 children and buried a husband she still missed every day. She lived in the apartment next to the modest unit Eleanor had rented as her cover story, a place that suggested a woman managing on limited means rather than one controlling $40 million. June saw Eleanor struggling with groceries in the hallway, 8 months pregnant and clearly exhausted. Pregnant and alone? Get inside. I am making soup, and you are going to tell me everything. It was not a request. Over the next 3 hours, Eleanor found herself spilling the entire story. The Christmas dinner, the humiliation, the envelope, the inheritance, the slowly building plan for revenge. June listened without interrupting, her expression cycling through shock, anger, and finally grim satisfaction. He announced divorce over dessert. What kind of psychopath ruins chocolate? Eleanor laughed despite herself. That is what you are focusing on? Honey, a man who would destroy his pregnant wife over Christmas dinner while serving chocolate cake is a man without a soul. The dessert detail just confirms it. June shook her head. His mother gave you a garbage bag? I would have filled it with her jewelry first. She thought I was too broken to fight back. June's eyes hardened. Are you? Eleanor met her gaze. No, I am just getting started. Good. Then you need allies. Nobody fights a war alone, and from what you are describing, this family has been at war for generations. They have practice. You need support. June became Eleanor's sounding board and moral compass. She had decades of experience watching people at their most vulnerable, reading character in the small moments when pretense fell away. She understood power dynamics and manipulation and the particular cruelty of families who treated legacy like religion. You know what they never expect, June said one afternoon, knitting while Eleanor reviewed financial documents. They never expect the help to have opinions. They never expect the invisible people to be watching, remembering, building their own power in the shadows. Your mother understood that. You understand it now. Eleanor nodded slowly. They still do not know I have any resources. Richard thinks I'm struggling on child support, desperate, and beaten. Let them keep thinking that. The moment they see you as a threat, they will circle the wagons. Right now, you are a non-issue. That invisibility is your greatest weapon. 3 weeks after Christmas, Emma Sterling called. Richard's sister had always been the quietest participant in the family's cruelty. She smirked at the right moments, made the expected comments, but there was something hollow behind her eyes, something that suggested she was playing a role rather than truly believing in the script. Eleanor, I need to tell you something. Emma's voice was thick with tears. I am so sorry for how I acted. I was scared of Mother. We all are. Eleanor considered hanging up. This could be a trap. Margaret sending her daughter to gather intelligence, to find weaknesses to exploit. But something in Emma's voice rang true. What do you want, Emma? The story came out in fragments. Emma's husband was having an affair. Margaret's advice had been to handle it quietly, to maintain appearances, to accept humiliation, in exchange for stability. Emma had looked at her marriage and seen herself becoming Eleanor. I will help you, Emma said. I will tell you everything about Mother's plans, Richard's business, the family's vulnerabilities. Just promise me that when it is over, there is something left for me too. Eleanor thought about the risk, thought about the potential reward. How do I know this is not a setup? Because Mother would never let me appear weak. If she had sent me, I would be confident and polished and completely convincing. The fact that I am crying and desperate is proof that this is real. Mother does not allow sterling women to be desperate. Eleanor made her decision. Tell me what you know. Over the following weeks, Emma became an invaluable source of insider information. She reported on board meetings and business strategies, on Margaret's social maneuvering, and Richard's increasing stress. She warned Eleanor when the investigators were hired, when lawyers discussed tactics. When the family's attention shifted in her direction, the alliance was fragile and dangerous. If Margaret discovered Emma's betrayal, the consequences would be severe. But Emma had reached her breaking point, and broken people made unpredictable choices. Meanwhile, Eleanor's pregnancy progressed. The baby was healthy, growing strong, completely unaware of the complex game being played around her existence. Eleanor talked to her constantly, explaining strategy, sharing plans, treating her unborn daughter like a confidant who would one day understand. Daniel continued his quiet support. He brought supplies without being asked, checked on Eleanor without being intrusive, offered help without expecting anything in return. His daughter, Lily, had decided that Eleanor's baby would be her best friend and drew increasingly elaborate welcome pictures. You know you do not have to keep doing this, Eleanor told Daniel one evening. "I have resources now. I can take care of myself." Daniel shrugged. "Never doubted you could. But everybody needs somebody in their corner, even people with resources. Have you ever found kindness in the most unexpected places? Have you ever realized that the people with the least to give often gave the most freely?" Eleanor was beginning to understand that her mother's real legacy was not the money, or the properties, or the strategic positions. It was the lesson that power meant nothing without wisdom, that revenge meant nothing without justice, that victory meant nothing without something worth protecting. She was not just fighting to destroy Richard anymore. She was fighting to build something better. The first attack came quietly, almost invisibly. Eleanor, through a series of shell companies Marcus had established, acquired controlling interest in 3 of Sterling Development's primary suppliers: steel, concrete, electrical components, the lifeblood of commercial construction. She did not cut off supplies immediately. That would be too obvious, too traceable. Instead, she created delays. Materials arrived late. Specifications were slightly wrong, requiring inspections and rework. Quality issues emerged that demanded investigation. Nothing catastrophic, nothing that could not be explained by ordinary business friction. But the delays accumulated. At Sterling Development's headquarters, Richard sat in crisis meetings that grew increasingly tense. "What do you mean the steel is 2 weeks late?" His voice carried the sharp edge of a man who was not accustomed to things going wrong. The CFO spread his hands. "Every supplier is having issues. It is like someone coordinated these problems. That is paranoid. It is just bad luck." But it was not bad luck. It was Eleanor, watching from a coffee shop across the street from Sterling headquarters, eating the most expensive pastry on the menu, while Richard's carefully constructed world developed its first cracks. Her phone buzzed. A text from June. "How was the show?" Eleanor smiled. "Better than Netflix. The Hancock Tower project fell behind schedule. 1 week became 2. 2 weeks became a month." Penalty clauses in the construction contracts began triggering, costing Sterling Development hundreds of thousands of dollars in fees. Richard pushed harder, demanded more, alienated contractors with his increasingly desperate demands. He had no idea that the woman he had thrown away was pulling strings from the shadows, that every frustrated phone call and emergency meeting was exactly what she intended. Eleanor attended a charity gala in March, slipping in as an anonymous donor through one of her mother's companies. She wore a simple black dress, positioned herself in corners where she could observe without being noticed, and watched Richard work the room. He looked stressed. There were lines around his eyes that had not been there at Christmas, a tension in his shoulders that suggested sleepless nights and difficult conversations. Victoria was beside him, her smile bright, but her grip on his arm possessive and concerned. They were arguing more. Emma's reports confirmed it. The stress of business problems was creating friction in their perfect new relationship. Eleanor felt a grim satisfaction watching them. Then Margaret appeared at her elbow. "I know what you are doing, Eleanor." Eleanor's blood ran cold. She forced her expression to remain neutral, forced her voice to stay calm. "I do not know what you mean. I am just a guest." Margaret's smile was sharp as a blade. "You think I do not recognize the signs, the suppliers, the delays, the convenient problems? I have been in this world for 40 years. I know when someone is playing games." Eleanor said nothing. Margaret leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Let me tell you something about power, dear. I built this family from nothing. My husband was a drunk with a good name. I made us into what we are, and I will destroy anyone who threatens my legacy." She walked away, leaving Eleanor standing alone with her heart pounding and her mind racing. Margaret knew, or at least suspected, the advantage of invisibility was eroding. 1 week later, the counterattack came. Child Protective Services arrived at Eleanor's apartment. Someone had made an anonymous report claiming she was living in squalor with drug paraphernalia, that she was unstable and unfit to be a mother. "We need to conduct an inspection," the caseworker said, her expression professionally neutral. "These are serious allegations." June, who was visiting when CPS arrived, immediately provided witness testimony. She had been in Eleanor's apartment daily, she explained. There were no drugs, no squalor, no instability. The apartment was clean, the nursery was prepared. Eleanor was a dedicated, expectant mother doing everything right. The investigation was dismissed within 48 hours, but Eleanor was shaken. Then Richard filed for full custody. His lawyers argued that Eleanor was mentally unfit, using her breakdown at Christmas dinner as evidence of instability. They claimed she had alienated herself from support systems, that she was isolated and struggling, that the child would be better served by the stable home Richard and Victoria could provide. Eleanor stared at the legal documents, at the clinical language that described her trauma as evidence of unfitness. "He is trying to take my daughter." Marcus's voice was calm but serious. "We will fight this. The case is weak, based on circumstantial evidence and obvious bias, but it will require resources and attention that might distract from your larger strategy." "I do not care about the strategy." Eleanor's voice broke. "He cannot have her. He threw us away, and now he wants to take her?" Then the third blow landed. Daniel was fired from the Hancock Tower project. Sterling Development discovered he had helped Eleanor, and Richard made a phone call. Within 24 hours, Daniel was told his services were no longer required. 15 years of reliable work ended with a single act of kindness. "They said I was unreliable," Daniel told Eleanor, his expression a mixture of anger and resignation. "Never had a complaint in my career. But I helped you, so now I am unemployable on any Sterling project." Eleanor's composure finally cracked. Alone in her apartment, after Daniel left, she threw things. She screamed. She cried. The carefully constructed patience her mother had taught her shattered against the weight of accumulated cruelty. She had thought she was winning. She had watched Richard's business struggle and felt powerful. But Margaret had struck back with precision, attacking Eleanor's child, her ally, her sense of security. "I thought I could do this." The words came out between sobs. "I thought I could beat them. But they have everything. The lawyers, the connections, the power, and I have what? Money my dead mother left me? They will take my baby." June found her on the floor, surrounded by broken glass and scattered papers. She sat down beside Eleanor and held her while she cried. "Honey, you are allowed to break. You are allowed to fall apart. But tomorrow you get back up. Because that little girl inside you is counting on her mama to be the strongest woman in any room, and you are that woman. You just forgot for a minute." Eleanor looked at June through her tears. "What if I cannot win? Then you lose. And you keep going anyway, because the alternative is letting them define you, and you are worth more than their opinion. Your daughter is worth more than their games." June held her until the tears stopped. "Tomorrow," Eleanor whispered. "Tomorrow, I get back up. Tomorrow, you get back up. And the day after that. And every day until this is finished. That is what strong women do. They break, and then they rise." Daniel appeared at Eleanor's door the next morning with a bouquet of daisies. "Roses are cliché," he explained. "You are not cliché." Eleanor managed a small smile. "You got fired because of me. You should be angry." Daniel shrugged. "I got fired for helping a pregnant woman. If that is the worst thing on my record, I am doing all right." He held out the flowers. Besides, my life was boring before you. Now I get fired, I have got a crazy ex-mother-in-law trying to destroy someone, and I might actually have to wear a suit to court. It is the most exciting thing since my divorce. Eleanor took the flowers. Wait, you were married? For 3 years. She left me for her yoga instructor. Said I lacked spiritual depth. What does that even mean? Still do not know. But I can now do a mean downward dog out of spite, Eleanor laughed. The sound surprised her. She had not thought laughter was possible after yesterday's breakdown. Daniel became a more regular presence after that. He picked up groceries, helped with apartment repairs, introduced Eleanor to his daughter, Lily. The little girl immediately decided that Eleanor's baby would be her best friend and demanded regular updates on the baby's development. Is she kicking yet? Lily asked with the intensity of an 8-year-old on a mission. Can I feel it? Eleanor guided Lily's small hand to her belly just as the baby moved. Lily's eyes went wide with wonder. She says hello, Lily declared with absolute certainty. She says she cannot wait to meet me. How do you know what she is saying? I am going to be her best friend. Best friends understand each other without words. The simple joy of the moment carved out space in Eleanor's heart that she had not known was empty. This was what she was fighting for. Not just revenge, not just justice, but the right to build moments like this, to create a life full of small wonders and unexpected connections. Emma called with news that changed everything. I found something in Mother's safe, Emma whispered, something she has been hiding for 20 years. The documents Emma delivered painted a picture of calculated cruelty that surpassed anything Eleanor had imagined. 20 years ago, Margaret Sterling had an affair. Richard's father discovered the truth and threatened to divorce her, take everything, expose her secrets to the society world she valued more than anything else. Margaret's response was clinical. She hired doctors to declare her husband mentally incompetent. She had him committed to a private psychiatric facility. She forged documents, manipulated records, and told her children that their father had suffered a breakdown and could not be part of their lives anymore. Richard's father was alive, locked away in a facility that Sterling money funded, paying for his own imprisonment with the fortune his wife had stolen. Oh my God, Eleanor breathed, looking at the documents. She destroyed her own husband to protect herself. Emma's voice was hollow. She did to my husband what she did to our father. When Thomas threatened to divorce me and expose her financial manipulation, she had him committed too. He is in the same facility, the Sterling family solution to inconvenient men who know too much. Eleanor looked at Emma with new understanding. That is why you are helping me. She took my husband. She took my father. She tried to take my brother's child. There has to be an end to it, Eleanor. There has to be consequences. If this gets out, Margaret is destroyed. Her reputation, her charity boards, her social standing, everything she values. Emma nodded. That is why she guards these documents so carefully. They are the keys to her kingdom. Whoever controls them controls her. Eleanor looked at the papers in her hands. Proof that Margaret Sterling was not just cruel, but criminal. Evidence that could bring down the matriarch who had orchestrated Eleanor's humiliation. There is more, Emma said. I also found records showing that Mother was the one who called CPS on you, and documentation proving that she paid Victoria $50,000 to start the affair with Richard. Eleanor felt the room tilt. She paid Victoria? Victoria was supposed to be the upgrade. Mother handpicked her, groomed her, positioned her as the suitable wife I could never be. The affair was not a spontaneous betrayal. It was a business transaction. Everything Eleanor had believed about her marriage rearranged itself. Richard's betrayal had been real, but it had been orchestrated by Margaret. Victoria was not a homewrecker, but a pawn, purchased and positioned. It did not make Richard innocent. He had still made the choice to betray his wife, to throw her out, pregnant on Christmas Eve, to try to steal their daughter. But it added another dimension to the cruelty. "The whole family is rotten," Eleanor said quietly, from the top down. "Not all of it." Emma's voice was small. "I am trying to be different." Eleanor looked at the woman who had once smirked at her humiliation, who had made pointed comments and stood by while her family inflicted cruelty. Emma was different now, broken and rebuilding, just like Eleanor. "You are different," Eleanor agreed, "and when this is over, I will make sure there is something left for you." I promised. The next phase of the plan came together quickly. Eleanor revealed through her legal team that she owned the land beneath Hancock Tower. The lease Sterling Development had signed was with her mother's shell company. Every month they had been paying rent to the woman they despised, funding the empire they did not know existed. At the Sterling Development board meeting, the news landed like a bomb. "Sir, we have a problem." The lawyer's voice was tight with barely contained panic. "The landowner is calling in the lease renegotiation clause." Richard waved dismissively. "Just pay whatever they want." "They do not want money. They want the building." Richard's face went pale. "Who owns the land?" Eleanor sent a message through Marcus Webb. A simple invitation. "Tell Mr. Sterling that the owner would like to meet. 3 o'clock tomorrow, at the coffee shop where his ex-wife used to get her morning tea." The message was clear. Richard would know exactly who he was dealing with before he ever walked through the door. Richard arrived at the coffee shop at exactly 3 o'clock. He looked like a man who had not slept well in weeks. The stress of declining stock prices and missed construction deadlines had carved lines into his face that aged him beyond his years. His suit was impeccable as always, but it hung on him slightly wrong, as if he had lost weight he could not afford to lose. Eleanor was already seated at a corner table. She had chosen her outfit carefully, a simple dress that cost more than his monthly car payment, understated jewelry that spoke of quiet wealth, an expression of absolute calm. She had imagined this moment for months, had rehearsed what she would say, how she would react to his shock, and anger, and eventual pleading. But now that he was standing in front of her, she felt only a cold, clear certainty. Richard stared at her for a long moment, his face cycling through disbelief, confusion, and finally, something approaching fear. This is impossible. You are nobody. You had nothing." Eleanor smiled. It was not a warm smile. "I had a mother who cleaned your house in 1995, who watched your father get locked away, who spent 30 years preparing for the day your family's cruelty finally caught up with them." Richard sank into the chair across from her, his composure cracking. "How?" "The prenup covered everything. You had no assets, no income, no resources. We checked. You checked my assets, my income, my resources. You never thought to check my mother's." Eleanor leaned forward slightly. "She was invisible to you, Richard, just like I was. The help, the furniture, nothing worth noticing. This is not possible. And yet here we are." Eleanor took a sip of her coffee. "I own the land under your building. I control 12% of your primary lender. I have systematically acquired your suppliers over the past 3 months. Every delay, every cost overrun, every quality issue your projects have faced, that was me." Richard's face darkened with anger. "You destroyed my company over a divorce?" Eleanor set down her cup carefully. "You threw me out pregnant on Christmas Eve to show off your mistress. You tried to take my daughter. You got Daniel fired for the crime of basic human decency. Every consequence you are facing, Richard, you earned." He tried to negotiate. That was predictable. Men like Richard always believed everything had a price. Every situation could be managed with the right deal. "What do you want?" Money? An apology? I will drop the custody case. I will give you a settlement. We can work this out? Work this. Eleanor stood. She had not expected this moment to feel so anticlimactic. She had imagined satisfaction, triumph, the sweet taste of revenge. Instead, she felt only tired. I want you to know that everything you lose from this point forward is because of me. Not bad luck, not market forces, me. The woman you called nothing. She dropped a business card on the table. Hayes Holdings, CEO Eleanor Hayes. Now you know who is coming for you. And Richard? I am just getting started. She walked out without looking back. The confrontation should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like a door closing, the end of a chapter, rather than the beginning of triumph. Eleanor had spent months planning this moment, rehearsing this scene, imagining how powerful she would feel when Richard finally understood what he had lost. But power, she was learning, did not feel the way she had expected. June was waiting at Eleanor's apartment with tea and questions. How did it go? Eleanor sat down heavily on the couch. He knows it is me, that I am behind everything, that I have resources he never imagined. His face when he realized was everything I thought I wanted. But Eleanor looked at her hands, but it did not feel like winning. It felt like ending something that should never have started, like closing a door on 3 years of my life and realizing those years are just gone. No revenge changes that. June nodded slowly. Your mother was a smart woman. She built you an empire, gave you the tools to destroy your enemies, but I do not think she wanted you to lose yourself in the destruction. What do you mean? When this started, you wanted justice. You wanted Richard to understand what he had done, to face consequences for his cruelty. That is righteous. That is fair. But somewhere along the way, revenge became the goal instead of the tool. And revenge, honey, it eats you alive if you let it. Eleanor thought about the months of planning, the careful strategy, the satisfaction of watching Richard struggle. She thought about the time she had spent building weapons instead of building a life. I do not know how to stop, she admitted. They are still trying to take my daughter. Margaret is still out there, planning, scheming. I cannot just walk away. I am not saying walk away. I am saying remember why you started. You wanted to protect your child, to build something better, to show your daughter that women do not have to be victims. Keep that focus. Let the revenge serve the purpose, not the other way around. The advice settled into Eleanor like rain on dry earth. She had lost sight of the goal, consumed by the battle. It was time to remember what victory actually looked like. The next 2 weeks brought changes Eleanor had not anticipated. Richard dropped the custody case. His lawyers advised him that the discovery process would reveal too much about his business practices, that fighting Eleanor in court would accelerate the company's decline. It was a strategic retreat, not a surrender, but it meant Eleanor's daughter was safe. Victoria filed for divorce. She had married Richard for his money and status, and both were evaporating. The Instagram influencer who had posed with Eleanor's wedding ring was now posting cryptic messages about new beginnings and toxic relationships. Margaret went quiet. No more CPS calls, no more legal maneuvers, no more indirect attacks. Emma reported that her mother was consolidating defenses, calling in favors, preparing for a battle she had not expected. The silence should have been comforting. Instead, it felt like the calm before a much larger storm. Eleanor's water broke at a baby shower. It was supposed to be a celebration. June had organized it, inviting the small group of people who had become Eleanor's found family over the past months. Daniel was there with Lily, who had made a banner reading "Welcome Baby" and decorated it with enough glitter to cause a hazard. Emma had come, nervous but determined to be part of something healthy. Marcus Webb had sent flowers and a savings bond. Eleanor was opening gifts when she felt the rush of warmth and immediately understood what was happening. The baby was coming, 1 month early. The drive to the hospital was a blur of contractions and fear. Daniel drove while June held Eleanor's hand, coaching her through breathing exercises she barely remembered from the classes she had taken alone because Richard could not be bothered to attend. At the hospital, everything went wrong very quickly. The baby was in distress. Eleanor needed an emergency cesarean section. For 12 terrifying minutes, the medical team fought to stabilize both mother and child, while Eleanor lay on the operating table, praying to a God she was not sure she believed in. Please, please let her be okay. Take everything else, but please let my daughter live. The baby's cry was the most beautiful sound Eleanor had ever heard. 5 pounds, 2 ounces, small but strong. 10 fingers, 10 toes, a full head of dark hair, and lungs that worked perfectly based on the volume of her protests. Eleanor named her Grace, after the mother who had given her everything. Daniel was in the waiting room when they finally let visitors in. He had been crying. He denied it, but the evidence was unmistakable. "She is beautiful," he said, looking at Grace with the wonder of a man who understood what miracles looked like. "She looks like you." "She looks like herself," Eleanor said. "She is going to be her own person, make her own choices, build her own life. I am just here to make sure she has the chance to do it." The moment should have been perfect. A new mother, holding her newborn, surrounded by people who cared about her, finally at peace after months of warfare. Then Margaret Sterling appeared in the doorway. "Congratulations on your daughter." Eleanor's blood ran cold. June moved to block Margaret's path, but the older woman simply walked around her with the ease of someone who had never been effectively stopped in her life. "Enjoy her while you can," Margaret said, sliding an envelope onto Eleanor's hospital bed. The contents turned Eleanor's world upside down. Photographs of her shell companies, documentation of her ownership of Meridian shares, proof connecting her to every strategic move she had made over the past months. "You think you are the only one who can investigate?" Margaret's smile was triumphant. "I know everything now, and I have already sent copies to every business paper in the country. By morning, you will be exposed as the woman who destroyed a 50-year-old company out of petty revenge. Your reputation will be as destroyed as mine would be if your little secrets came out." Eleanor looked at the documents, at the careful evidence of everything she had built and done. Her anonymity, her greatest weapon, was gone. "Yes, Emma told me everything," Margaret continued. "Did you really think my own daughter would betray me?" The words hit like a physical blow. Emma, the ally Eleanor had trusted, the insider who had provided crucial information, had been feeding everything to Margaret. "You will find that your accounts are being investigated for fraud," Margaret said pleasantly. "Your property holdings are being challenged in court. Your control of Meridian shares is being disputed by shareholders who suddenly have questions about how you acquired them." She leaned close to Eleanor's hospital bed. "I told you at that gala, I built this family from nothing, and I will destroy anyone who threatens my legacy. You should have listened." Margaret left. The room felt smaller, darker, the joy of Grace's birth contaminated by the reality crashing down around them. Eleanor held her newborn daughter close and felt everything she had built start to collapse. June sat beside her. "What do we do?" "I do not know." Eleanor's voice was hollow. "I thought I had won. I thought I was smarter, more patient, more prepared, but she was playing me the entire time." Daniel took her hand. "You have people in your corner. That has not changed. But the empire she had inherited, the careful strategy she had executed, the revenge she had been building for months, all of it was compromised. Margaret had outmaneuvered her at the moment of her greatest vulnerability. Have you ever achieved everything you worked for, only to watch it crumble? Have you ever been so close to victory that you could taste it and then had it torn away? Eleanor looked at Grace, sleeping peacefully, unaware of the chaos surrounding her birth. This tiny person was depending on her. This tiny person needed a mother who would not give up, no matter how impossible things seemed. "I am not done," Eleanor whispered. "I do not care what she knows or what she has done. I am not done fighting." "How?" June asked. "She has exposed everything." "Then I stop hiding." Eleanor's voice grew stronger. "She expects me to scramble, to run, to try to protect my secrets. Instead, I go public first. I tell my story before she can tell hers." Daniel frowned. "That is a big risk. It is the only play I have left." Eleanor looked at Grace again. "And I am tired of fighting in the shadows. My mother taught me patience and strategy, but she also taught me that sometimes you have to stand up and be counted. Margaret wants a war? Fine. But we are going to fight it in the light where everyone can see who the real villains are." Emma Sterling appeared at Eleanor's apartment 2 days after the hospital. "I did not betray you." Eleanor almost closed the door in her face. Almost. But something in Emma's expression stopped her. The desperation there was too real, too raw to be manufactured. "Your mother said you told her everything." Emma's laugh was bitter. "I told her I was on her side. I made her believe I was still the obedient daughter, too scared to cross her, too weak to stand on my own. She showed me where she keeps the documents about father. She explained her strategy for destroying you." Eleanor studied Emma's face, looking for deception and finding only exhaustion and determination. "Why would you do that?" "Because she did to my husband what she did to our father. Because I have spent my entire life being invisible in my own family, and I finally found something worth being visible for, because you promised that when this was over, there would be something left for me." Emma's voice broke. "And because I need to believe that the monsters do not always win." She held out a flash drive. Everything. The documents about father and Thomas. The records of the CPS report she filed. The contract she signed with Victoria. Bank statements showing the payments. Medical records she forged. Every crime she has committed for the past 20 years documented and saved. Eleanor took the flash drive. "If this is another trick, it is not a trick. It is the only honest thing I have done in years." Emma met Eleanor's eyes. "You asked me once why you should believe me. I told you that mother would never let a Sterling woman appear desperate. That is still true. She thinks I am at home, obediently waiting for further instructions." Emma smiled grimly. "She has no idea that I spent the past 3 months making copies of every incriminating document in her safe. That I have been building my own exit strategy since the moment she committed my husband. That I am finally done being her obedient daughter." Eleanor looked at the flash drive in her hand. If this was real, it changed everything. Not just evidence, but proof. Not just ammunition, but weapons. She also found out that Margaret paid Victoria to seduce Richard. Emma continued. "The affair was not spontaneous. It was arranged, like a business transaction. Victoria was supposed to be the upgrade, the suitable wife I could never be. Mother orchestrated the entire thing. Victoria was a pawn who accepted $50,000 to destroy your marriage." Emma's voice was hard. "I am not asking you to feel sorry for her. I am just saying that the rot goes all the way to the top. Mother does not just control this family. She creates the situations that let her control us." Eleanor thought about Richard, about the choices he had made. He was still responsible for his actions. He had still thrown her out pregnant on Christmas Eve. But knowing that Margaret had engineered the betrayal added a fifth layer to the cruelty. "The whole family is sick," Eleanor said quietly. "Most of it," Emma agreed. "But I am trying to be different, and I think you are the only person who can help me prove it." The plan came together quickly after that. Marcus Webb reviewed the flash drive and confirmed its authenticity. The documents were devastating. Margaret Sterling had committed fraud, forgery, unlawful imprisonment, and conspiracy to commit multiple crimes. Any prosecutor in the country would salivate at the case. "We need to go public before she can spin the narrative," Eleanor said during a strategy session at Marcus's office. "She is counting on me, trying to hide, to protect my anonymity, to fight this in the shadows. Instead, we bring everything into the light." "That means exposing yourself too," Marcus warned. "Your role in Sterling Development's decline will be public knowledge." Eleanor nodded. "I know. But there is a difference between a daughter-in-law seeking justice against the family that destroyed her and a vengeful ex-wife attacking a legitimate business." We tell the whole story. The Christmas Eve dinner, the garbage bag, the CPS call, the custody fight, all of it. The Sterling Foundation Charity Gala was scheduled for the following weekend. It was Margaret's coronation, her annual moment of triumph where Boston's elite gathered to celebrate her philanthropy and social standing. 500 guests, extensive press coverage, and the announcement of Margaret as the new chair of the Children's Hospital Board. It was the perfect stage for a reckoning. The week before the gala passed in a blur of preparation. Marcus coordinated with journalists who would be present. Emma confirmed logistics and security details. June helped Eleanor choose a dress and rehearse what she would say. Daniel asked only one question. "Are you sure about this?" Eleanor looked at Grace, sleeping in her bassinet, already a month old and somehow more beautiful every day. She thought about what she was risking, what she was sacrificing, what she was choosing. "I am sure." Eleanor's voice was steady. "My mother taught me patience and strategy, but she also taught me that sometimes you have to stand up and be counted. Margaret needs to face consequences, and I need my daughter to grow up knowing that her mother did not hide from bullies. She confronted them." Daniel nodded slowly. "Then I will be right there with you." The night before the gala, Eleanor could not sleep. She stood at her apartment window, looking out at the city lights, thinking about everything that had brought her to this moment. The Christmas dinner where she had been discarded. The cold walk through snow. The envelope that had changed everything. Her mother had spent 30 years building weapons for a war she hoped would never come. Now Eleanor was about to use those weapons in the most public way possible. She thought about what victory actually meant. Not revenge, not destruction, something more complicated than either. Justice, maybe. Accountability. The simple principle that action should have consequences, even for people with money and power, and generations of impunity. Or maybe it was simpler than that. Maybe victory was just Grace, sleeping peacefully, already loved by more people than Eleanor had ever expected to find. The baby stirred, making the soft sounds of infant dreaming, and Eleanor picked her up, settling into the rocking chair they had found at a second-hand store. "Tomorrow, everything changes." Eleanor spoke softly, watching her daughter's face in the dim light. "Tomorrow, the whole world finds out who your grandmother really was, and who your grandfather really is, and what kind of family you were supposed to belong to." Grace's tiny fingers curled around Eleanor's thumb. "But here's what matters. You have people who love you, not because of money or status, or what you can do for them, because of who you are. That is the inheritance that really matters. Not the $40 million, not the properties, not the strategic positions. Love, family, the people who show up when everything falls apart. Eleanor pressed a kiss to Grace's forehead. Your grandmother built me an empire, but what I am going to build for you is better, a life, a real one, with people who choose each other instead of using each other. That is what we are fighting for tomorrow. Not revenge, something bigger. Grace slept on, peaceful and unaware, trusting her mother completely. And Eleanor decided that trust was worth more than any amount of money. The Sterling Foundation Charity Gala was exactly as magnificent as Margaret had intended. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbow light across 500 guests dressed in designer gowns and tailored tuxedos. An orchestra played classical music, while waiters circulated with champagne and canapés. The venue, a historic ballroom overlooking the city, had been transformed into a showcase of wealth and taste. Margaret Sterling stood at the center of it all, radiant in silver silk, accepting congratulations on her impending appointment as chair of the Children's Hospital Board. She smiled graciously, laughed warmly, played the role of philanthropist and society queen with the skill of someone who had been practicing for decades. She had no idea what was coming. Eleanor arrived with Daniel and June flanking her like an honor guard. She wore a deep blue gown that had cost a fraction of what Margaret's dress probably cost but fit her perfectly. She carried herself with the calm certainty of someone who had nothing left to lose and everything to gain. The host at the entrance consulted his list. Name? Eleanor Hayes, major donor. She had written the biggest check of the night. It was a small price to pay for admission. The room shifted as Eleanor walked in. Whispers spread through the crowd, a ripple of recognition that gained momentum as more people noticed who had just arrived. Richard Sterling's ex-wife, the woman at the center of the business scandal everyone had been reading about. Richard saw her first. He was standing near the bar, a drink in his hand, looking like a man who had aged 10 years in the past 6 months. His face went pale, and he set down his glass with a hand that was visibly shaking. Victoria was there too, lurking at the edge of the crowd, trying to be invisible despite her red dress. Her Instagram following had cratered after the scandal broke. She was nobody's upgrade now. Eleanor made her way through the crowd, feeling eyes follow her, hearing whispers trail in her wake. She was not afraid. She had been through worse than social scrutiny. The worst had already happened. Everything from here was recovery. Marcus Webb approached the stage just as Margaret finished her acceptance speech. He wore the slightly apologetic expression of a lawyer about to ruin someone's evening. I apologize for interrupting, but Meridian Holdings has an announcement regarding Sterling Development's remaining credit lines. The screens flanking the stage lit up with financial data, charts showing debt levels, documents revealing missed payments, numbers that told a story of a company in free fall. Sterling Development is formally entering bankruptcy proceedings. Marcus announced. The board has voted to liquidate remaining assets. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Richard pushed forward through the crowd, his face twisted with fury. You cannot do this! Eleanor's voice carried clearly across the ballroom. I just did. Richard spun toward her, recognition and horror dawning simultaneously. You actually went through with it. I told you at the coffee shop. Eleanor kept her voice steady. Everything you lose from this point forward is because of me. Did you think I was bluffing? Margaret pushed through the crowd, her face composed but her eyes blazing. This is ridiculous. My son's business troubles have nothing to do with this event. We are here to celebrate philanthropy, not air dirty laundry. Actually, Eleanor said, stepping toward the stage, we are here for exactly that. She climbed the steps to the podium, feeling the weight of 500 pairs of eyes tracking her movement. This was the moment. Everything she had built and survived had been leading here. Ladies and gentlemen, I have a story to tell you about the woman you are honoring tonight. The screens changed, new documents appeared, hospital records, commitment papers, bank statements. 20 years ago, Margaret Sterling had her husband declared mentally incompetent and committed to a psychiatric facility. Not because he was ill, but because he discovered her affair and threatened to divorce her. He has been imprisoned there ever since, paying for his own captivity with family money. Gasps, murmurs, horror spreading through the crowd like fire. "Those are fabricated." Margaret's voice was sharp, desperate. The first crack in her careful composure. "These are hospital records signed by you, Margaret." Eleanor pointed to the screen. "Dr. Harrison from Meadowbrook Psychiatric is here tonight. He has already confirmed their authenticity to the police." As if on cue, uniformed officers appeared at the ballroom entrances. Not dramatic, not theatrical, just present. A reminder that consequences were real. But Margaret's cruelty did not stop with her husband. Eleanor continued. When her son Thomas Sterling threatened to divorce Emma and expose Margaret's financial manipulation, she had him committed too. Same facility, same forged documents, same imprisonment disguised as medical care. Eleanor stepped closer to Margaret, watching the older woman's mask finally shatter. "You called CPS on me when I was 8 months pregnant. You tried to take my daughter through a custody case built on lies. You paid Victoria Chase $50,000 to seduce your own son so you could orchestrate my replacement." Eleanor, Margaret's voice was barely a whisper now. "You do not get to say my name." Eleanor's voice was iron. "You tried to destroy me. You tried to take my child. You thought you could do whatever you wanted because you had money and power and generations of impunity." She turned to face the crowd. But here is what Margaret Sterling and people like her never understand. Sometimes the people they step on, the invisible ones, the help, the furniture, sometimes we are watching. Sometimes we are learning. Sometimes we are building power of our own in the shadows while they are too arrogant to notice. The police moved forward. Margaret's composure cracked completely. "Richard, do something." But Richard was backing away. He had never truly been brave. He had always needed his mother's approval, her direction, her protection. Without those things, he was just a man in an expensive suit watching his life implode. "Margaret Sterling, you are under arrest for fraud, forgery, unlawful imprisonment, and conspiracy." They handcuffed her in front of 500 of her closest social contacts. Margaret, who had spent her life building reputation, lost it in a single moment of public accountability. As they led her past Eleanor, Margaret stopped. "You will regret this." Eleanor shook her head. "I already have regrets. You are not one of them." Victoria tried to slip out during the chaos, but reporters had gathered at the exits. Someone shouted questions about the $50,000. Someone else asked about her role in destroying Eleanor's marriage. Her Instagram career, already damaged, collapsed completely under the weight of documented proof. Richard stood alone in the center of the ballroom. Everyone had backed away from him, creating a circle of empty space around a man who had once commanded rooms with his confidence. He approached Eleanor slowly, his face a mask of devastation. "I lost everything. My company, my mother, my reputation. Are you happy now?" Eleanor considered the question seriously. She thought about the Christmas dinner, the garbage bag, the walk through snow. She thought about the months of careful strategy, the breakdown in her apartment, the terror when Grace was born too early. Number 1, I am not happy you are destroyed, Richard. I am relieved I survived. I am grateful my daughter will not grow up watching her mother be humiliated. And I am sad that you could have been a good man, but you chose this instead. Richard's composure finally cracked. Tears streamed down his face, the first genuine emotion Eleanor had seen from him in years. I am sorry. I am so sorry for what I did. Eleanor looked at the man she had once loved, the father of her child, the person who had tried so hard to break her. I know. And someday, maybe I will forgive you, but not today. Today you face the consequences. What you do with them is up to you. She walked away, Daniel on one side and June on the other. Grace was at home with a babysitter, safe and loved and blissfully unaware that her mother had just changed history. Behind her, the gala dissolved into chaos. Reporters shouted questions, society matrons clutched their pearls. The carefully constructed world of the Boston elite cracked and shifted as the foundations they had built on cruelty and silence finally gave way. 6 months later, Eleanor stood at the window of her new office at Hayes Holdings. The company her mother had built in secret was now hers openly. She had restructured it, expanded it, begun using its resources to build affordable housing in the neighborhoods where she had grown up. The work felt meaningful in a way that revenge never had. Grace was crawling now, exploring the world with the fearless curiosity of a baby who had never known insecurity. She had Daniel's easy laugh and Eleanor's determined expression. She had June's warmth and Emma's gentle spirit. She had grown up surrounded by love from the first moment of her life. Richard was working at a homeless shelter downtown. Court-ordered community service had become something more, a genuine calling that surprised everyone, including himself. He sent letters to Grace every month, careful words that acknowledged his failures and expressed hope for eventual relationship. Eleanor let him visit sometimes, supervised, watched by people who would protect Grace if necessary. He was trying to be better. Whether he would succeed remained to be seen. Margaret was in prison, 5 years for her crimes, though Eleanor suspected she was suffering more from the loss of her reputation than from any physical restriction. The charity boards had expelled her. The society friends had vanished. The legacy she had spent her life building had crumbled to dust. Victoria had moved to another city, deleted her social media, and was reportedly working as a real estate agent. Eleanor did not think about her much. Emma had taken over what remained of Sterling Development. She had rebranded it, restructured it, begun building projects that helped communities instead of displacing them. She was in therapy twice a week, processing a lifetime of trauma and learning how to be a person instead of a performance. Her father and husband had been released from the psychiatric facility. They were both recovering, both rebuilding, both learning how to be free after years of captivity. "Mama," Grace said from the floor. It was her first word, delivered with the triumphant certainty of a baby who had just discovered something amazing. Eleanor picked up her daughter, feeling the weight of her, the warmth of her, the absolute rightness of her existence. "That is right. I am your mama, and I am never going to let anyone make you feel small." Grace grabbed Eleanor's hair and pulled, which seemed like agreement. Daniel appeared in the doorway with lunch. His daughter Lily had made sandwiches, apparently, which meant they were probably more glitter than bread, but would be eaten with enthusiasm regardless. "The girls are waiting," he said, meaning Lily and June, who had somehow become permanent fixtures in Eleanor's life. "Tell them we are coming." Daniel nodded, but did not leave. He looked at Eleanor with the expression of a man who had learned not to rush important moments. "You know I love you, right?" Eleanor smiled. "You mentioned it once or twice, just making sure." He crossed the room and kissed her, gentle and certain and full of promise. "Lily is already planning the wedding, you know. She has opinions about flowers. We are taking it slow, Eleanor reminded him. My picker was broken. I am getting it fixed. Daniel laughed. Take all the time you need. I am not going anywhere. He left to join the others, and Eleanor stood for a moment alone with Grace, looking out at the city below. June's voice echoed in her memory. You know what I told her when she first showed up at my door? I said, Honey, some women get pearls for Christmas. You got a garbage bag and a lawsuit. But at least it was not boring. Eleanor had laughed. It had been the first time she had laughed in weeks, and it had meant everything. She laughed now, remembering, holding her daughter close. The story that had begun with Christmas Eve cruelty ended with ordinary love. Not revenge, not victory, just a life, built from the ruins of a life that had never really been hers. Eleanor had learned that the best revenge was not destroying your enemies. It was building something so good, so full of love, that they became a footnote in your story instead of the main character. Her mother had given her $40 million and the tools to seek justice, but the real inheritance was this, the understanding that patience was power, that kindness was strength, that the woman who kept getting up, no matter how many times she was knocked down, was the woman they never saw coming. Grace made a sound that might have been another word, or might have been a commentary on the sandwich situation downstairs. Let us go find our family, Eleanor said. They are waiting for us. She walked out of her office, carrying her daughter toward the people who loved them both. Behind her, through the window, the city sparkled in afternoon light. Somewhere out there, Margaret Sterling was in a cell. Richard Sterling was trying to rebuild his soul, and the world was full of people making choices that would define their lives. Eleanor had made her choices. She had chosen grace over grudges, love over legacy, family over fortune, and she had never been more powerful. Now, before we dive in, I need to ask you something. Do you know someone who needs to hear this story? Someone who is going through a difficult time, facing people who make them feel small, wondering if things will ever get better? Share this with them. Sometimes a story can change everything. And if this is your first time here, welcome to the family. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a story. We release new content every week, and trust me, you do not want to miss what is coming next. Drop a comment below telling me where you are watching from and what time it is. I read every single comment, and I love knowing that our family stretches across the entire world. If you have been here before, thank you for coming back. Your support means everything. Now, let us get into Eleanor's story. Outro. Closing statement. Thank you for staying until the end. Stories like Eleanor's remind us that no matter how dark things get, there is always a path forward. Remember, the people who underestimate you are giving you your greatest advantage. Use it wisely. If this story touched you, hit the like button. It helps more than you know. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And subscribe if you want more stories that inspire, empower, and remind you of your own strength. I will see you in the next one. Take care of yourself. And never forget, you are stronger than you think. This content has been carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to deliver meaningful stories with valuable life lessons. Every narrative is crafted with intention, designed not just to entertain, but to inspire, educate, and empower our viewers. We believe that stories have the power to change lives. Thank you for being part of this journey with us.